Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 54 to 58 will be covered today. The Quran helps remove cognitive dissonance. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any further inquiry or question. Recap verses 44 to 53. Allah does not do injustice to mankind. It is mankind themselves who do wrong to their own selves. This verse sets the scene of the human world clearly and opens the gate towards seeking further clarification on this important permanent value. We went through considerable detail regarding this verse 44, that Allah does not do injustice to mankind. So what it means is that the Quran puts it squarely in front of us that whatever is happening in your world, you should find out the cause and then try to address it in the light of the Quran. Everything follows laws in the universe, including the human world. The time of respite between human birth and death needs to be looked at consciously using the Quranic guidance. And this is important, that we should be quite conscious of our passing time, that is serial time, should I say, in this world, and remain very vigilant and very aware that our life is finite and it will end with physical death. And whatever is happening from now till we leave this life, we should look at it in the light of the Quran. The efforts which we make on the path of Allah using the Quranic guidance may not come to fruition during our finite life in this world. But that does not mean that these efforts will go to waste. The Quran states that the outcomes of our efforts are according to the law of requital and the law of respite of Allah. This is an important point, because when we get onto this path of the Quran and start making efforts to develop ourselves, we obviously want the world to change around us. And if it does not, and if we don't see physical effects of our efforts in the short term, that does not mean that these effects are not taking place. So the Quran here gives us hope that despite this life being finite, at the level of our self's life, our self's journey, we are going to continue beyond our death. And we have gone through these aspects in some other presentations. Every nation in the world gets adequately warned, either through human beings living among them or through the consequences of their own deeds, or both. So warning is a must. If we see that people, when they suffer, and even if individually we talk to them, we will see that they were warned before that suffering arrived, because all these sufferings come through our own hands. And if it comes through our own hands, then we have to be responsible of contributing to it. At times, it may not be. For example, if an accident happens not because of my mistake, but the mistake of somebody else, then of course it is beyond my control. But there are, mostly we can figure out the causes for different events taking place in our life. By following the wrong path, these nations ultimately decline and get destroyed through their own deeds. We cannot escape the effects of our deeds. Let's go to the first verse for our presentation today. وَلَوْ أَنَّا لِكُلِّ نَفْسٍ ظَلَمَتْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ لَأَفْتَدَتْ بِهِ وَأَسَرُّوا نَدَامَةً لَمَّا رَأَوُا الْعَذَابَ وَقُضِيَ بَيْنَهُم بِالْقِسْطِ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Then not only is the arrival of this destruction certain, it is also so concrete that the tyrant and rebellious on whom it descends, even if he wishes to avoid it by giving all the wealth in the world, this cannot happen. When they see this destruction, such people will then try to hide their chagrin. In any event, the decision for their affair will be carried out precisely in accordance with haqq and justice, and not an iota of zulm, injustice will be done to them. Now let us look at this verse in slightly more detail. The Quran here brings out some aspects of human thinking. First is the scene presented here by the Quran of the state of completion of human accountability is very graphical. That ultimately our deeds catch up. And even if we think our deeds haven't caught up, then death is in any case will decide that where we start our next life. I.e., by pointing to the fact that each self does injustice to itself. And this continues during their lifetime. Man follows the path of his desires and emotions without giving any thought to the possibility of accountability and to a higher purpose of his life. An important fact towards which the Quran draws attention here is regarding the mentality behind such a path of life. And this is very important for us to register and pass it on to others as well. It is wealth and power which human beings acquire due to unjust systems, and they consider themselves beyond any accountability and are oblivious of the fact that with death, their finite stay in this life, in any case, comes to an end. And this is important, that there's no doubt that the wealth and power provides us with material security, and particularly under the capitalist system. But we should look at it very closely and say that can it save us from death? And that is one point. Second is this the way we live our life, that everyone is pursuing wealth and power? And where will it end? Because everything has a finite end. And then what will happen? The wealth they accumulated cannot firstly save them from death, and secondly, it is of no use towards the state of development of the self. And this point will become very clear later on, where we will link accumulation of wealth with the development of the self. Wealth, possessions, power are related to the physical domain, i.e. life of this world. And it is very obvious as well, when trouble comes, and we have seen it, that the people then end up spending all what they have in order to, for example, if they're suffering from cancer, they will try to get a best treatment so that they can recover from that. But the issue before us is to look at the mechanics of the way we are living in this world. And as a consequence of that, we are creating problems for each other. Then Allah makes it clear that at that point, do not look around for any excuse or cause for your own failures. Read your own book of deeds and accept the verdict of your own failure when you find that you do not have a self which can meet the criterion of the life of the hereafter. And this is what Quran does. Quran is actually preparing us for all eventualities, all risks, even within the capitalist system, man-made system, so that we are fully aware of the way our life is panning out before us. It prepares us for the future and prepares us through our self-development. Everything noted in the Quran is haqq. Allah inna lillahi ma fis samawati wal ardi, Allah inna wa'dallahi haqqun walakinna aksarahum la ya'lamun. How will these people make the law of requital of Allah impotent? The reality is that whatever is in the highs and lows of the universe, it is Allah alone who has control and authority over everything. And we can see it all around, because our stay over here is very finite. Whereas once we leave, the universe will still be there. Thus, when Allah has declared about something that it will be in this way, then it will indeed be accomplished exactly like that, as it is based on haqq. But most people do not make use of their knowledge and vision and remain lost in this thought that there is no one to hold them to account. So it's not to create fear in us. What Quran is saying over here is to come to grips with the reality of the things and the universe around us. Relating to the creation around us helps to reflect on being human. In a number of previous verses, issues relating to human accountability are noted and their various aspects are elaborated. Now, in this verse, the Quran has reminded us about 3 points. Firstly, make it a part of yourself that the universe belongs to Allah and that He has authority and control over every aspect of the universe, including the world handed over to mankind for a stated term. His laws, some of which are visible while others are not yet visible, function in every aspect of the universe. Secondly, whatever is being stated in the Quran is based on haqq, i.e., for constructive outcomes. The commitments made by Allah are meant to be fulfilled, hence figure out their finer details and remain steadfast and patient. Allah never goes against His commitments. Laws always produce their results. Thirdly, do not be among the majority who do not acquire knowledge and hence remain ignorant and in darkness. It is through knowledge that we can provide benefit to mankind, because it is through knowledge that we improve our understanding. If I don't have knowledge, I can't apply the values of the Quran. And that is important, that wherever there are gaps, we should acquire more knowledge. In fact, life Life should be a continuous pursuit of knowledge, adding information to ourselves and then trying to make sense out of it. 1056, the process of life and death needs our profound attention and reflection. That law of requital, according to which the supreme revolution of the life and death of individuals and nations also occurs, and your deeds also return to it. These simply cannot go outside of its domain of authority. Just reflect to what an extent that law of Allah is possessor of infinite powers. Exploring life and death further. I have slightly gone over and above what is stated in the Quran, because if we keep the whole context in mind of life and death, and then the law of going back to Allah's laws all the time, and then I thought that it is better that we expand the verse slightly more than what is noted over here. The Quran has referred to the issue of life and death in a number of verses. In this verse, both aspects of life can be taken into account, i.e., the physical life of individuals and the collective life of nations. Of course, this can be metaphorically. Both forms are witnessed in our world. However, there is another kind of life towards which the Quran has drawn our attention, which is the new life, inverted commas, we acquire by creating a self within the guidance of the Quran. That is where the purpose of human creation lies. And we can differentiate, being on this path, that there was a life before we came to the Quran, and then our life took a new turn, and we acquired a new understanding, new awareness, new consciousness, in which now we are exploring the Quranic value system. And these two can be very clearly differentiated. These are easily discernible. We can differentiate between the two aspects of our individual lives by looking at the transformation within ourselves after we accept Iman, and then through Saleh deeds strengthen ourselves. Because Saleh deeds, what they do is they expand our vision, they expand our outlook, and we can see those things which we previously could not see. Because through these, we understand other human beings. And just understanding myself is not enough. Allah wants us to understand the whole of mankind the way Allah understands the whole of mankind. Because we are pledging, we are promising, we are committing to work on behalf of Allah to carry out His duties as noted in the Quran. The self without Iman and the self after Iman have a totally different outlook, vision, and character. This is that new life about which Ibrahim asked the question, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. O Rabb, how do you give life to the dead? And this is the question which Quran answers from beginning to the end. Note it is addressed to Rabb, i.e. the Rububiyyat aspect of human existence. Next is our physical life is finite, while the life of ourself has potentials for further growth. And of course, the question over here is, do we want further growth? And of course, we, the students of the Quran, want as much growth as possible while we are in this world. The Quran has drawn our attention to this aspect of new life by declaring, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu astajibu lillahi walil Rasool iza da'akum lima yuhyikum. And what it's saying is that, O Jamaat Momineen, that you should respond to the call of Allah and Rasool as He calls you to something which will give you life, lima yuhyikum, which will give you life, which will make you aware, which will make you understand that why the Quran is asking you to come to its guidance. Respond to the invitation of Allah and His Rasool, which will give you life. And it is in, just note, it is in collective form. Then made it amply clear that it is through coming to grips with the reality of our existence that we can discern clearly between the physical aspect of our life and the life of the self. And this is a very powerful verse, and it needs quite a lot of explanation, actually. If we, I'll come to that later. وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. This worldly life is the first stage preceding further evolutionary stages of the human self's development. Never consider the physical side of this stage of human life as the primary aim. So Quran is again and again drawing our attention to this fact that don't think this worldly life is lahbun wa lahbun. That is, it is sport and entertainment. It is to waste time. It is to just sit down and do nothing. Concentrate attention on the cognitive side of life. Think about it. Whatever is going on in our life, we must continuously think about it. And then try to do useful things within the values of the Quran. It possesses those latent potentials which need the focus of eye and the guidance of the Quran to manifest its loftiness and eminence. Now, the word used over here is hayawan. Hayawan is on the weight of fulan. And if we look at in Lughatul Quran, there is quite a bit of explanation given by Allama Parwez that over here what Quran is telling us is that Innal daral akhirata lahiyal hayawanu means that your life will get a significant jump, different from this life once you enter into the domain of the hereafter. And actually, the way I look at it, and I gave it a lot of thought, I said that even over here as well, that from a normal life which we are living before coming to the Quran, our life did get a jump, hayawan. We suddenly started looking at things differently than what these appeared to be in a previous life. Previous life was very much just a survival. Now we are literally living because we are extremely conscious of what is going on within our own life and, of course, in the outer world. If these potentials are not explored and remain dormant, then do not think that this makes no difference. These unexplored potentials will keep creating issues subconsciously, leading to fear and huzn. For example, fear of death, and your existence will become an unlived life. This point I put down after a careful thought, and I want everyone to reflect over it, that what happens is that those potentials, let's say, before acquiring this new life under inverted commas in the light of the Quran, we had a previous life. Under the previous life, some of the potentials which now we are exploring, some of the abilities we are exploring now, the change in outlook was there, but it was in a dormant state, it was in a latent state. If those had remained unexplored, imagine how much problems psychologically those will create in the rest of our life, because these are there waiting to be explored, but we are not addressing them. We are suppressing them. And all those urges where some kind of a fear comes in our heart that what is the purpose of life? Why there is a death? Why am I here? And is there a life after death? And we suppress it with some kind of emotive religious practices and try to deceive ourselves. And as a result, those turn into fear and huzn, and we live an unlived life. So that is the point I'm trying to make over here. We can expand it even further. Life at the self's level provides a wider view of our existence in this world and beyond. The Quran has reiterated various aspects about the concept of Allah. This includes the issue of the life of man in many verses. وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ. And put your trust in him who lives and dies not. I'll go through it again. And put your trust in him, that is Allah, who lives and dies not. The simple translation is like that. Now let us expand it a bit further. This should lead to a higher understanding for developing this part of ourself, i.e., it is our consciousness which defines each one of us. And if this precise concept of Allah, as given in the Quran, becomes part of our psyche, then essentially we can come to grips with our own life and its purpose. So what Quran is trying to draw our attention is that you are far more than what you think you are. And the moment you come to the Quran and accept that concept of Allah, which is explained in the Quran, and that concept of Allah, if it becomes your model, and you follow and you manifest those divine attributes and follow those permanent values after understanding those, then essentially you are putting your trust in Allah, who has now become your model. And being the possessors of divine energy, now that is link is established. Of course, it is not something that Allah has come into us. That is not what the Quran is saying. What the Quran is saying is that you follow his divine attributes and then see the change which comes in your own character, conduct, and your own outlook. And that is where the secret of life lies, la yamutu. Because once we make Allah as a model, then we are progressing on a higher plane of existence in the world. A developed self can now understand its own intrinsic value. And that is important because what is my intrinsic value? What is our intrinsic value as human beings, as possessors of divine energy? We would like to increase that intrinsic value. I'll over here state that the difference between intrinsic value and market value is that if we look at, for example, a mango, then mango has an intrinsic value. Even if we have paid nothing for it, it will still taste the same. It will still have a nutrient value. Market value is what human beings put on that mango, but that does not change the taste and the nutrient value and the aesthetic value of a mango. Same goes for human beings. Human beings have their own inherent intrinsic value. Each one of us have an intrinsic value, being a special creation of Allah who possess dignity and respect right at the basic level. And that is the point which Quran is trying to draw our attention when it says zikrukum, that this Quran is your own dhikr. It is for your own eminence and loftiness. And its purpose in the overall frame of the system of deen. And it is the system of deen which will rightly evaluate each human being based on its basic or fundamental intrinsic value, and will make people realize that don't undervalue yourself. You have a very high intrinsic value because this value is the one which is going to multiply after coming to the Quran and then go on to the next life to rise even higher. This transformed consciousness becomes aware of its duties as defined by the Quran, and in the deliverance of this task, it becomes alive to the fact that wa alayhi turja'un. Alayhi turja'un means that every respect, not only that every act of ours, every thought of ours is evaluated according to the laws of Allah, but we should also be aware of it, that it is alayhi turja'un. This is happening. And that is where our intrinsic value comes into play. Our thinking, conduct, and behavior should meet the criterion of the law of Allah, and that is Mashiach. As we know, the Quran invites all such selves to strive together for the common objective of the system of deen and face all challenges by reminding ourselves, that is themselves, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, that Allah with all his attributes is telling us that you should be aware of your own existence and aware of your own intrinsic value all along and keep developing it in order to become eligible for the system of deen. Then 56, finer aspects of our life. Here is the subtle point which needs a further reflection. In verse, for example, 32:9, Summa sawwahu wa nafakha fihi min ruhihi. This divine energy provided I with the choice and intent and metacognitive attribute of thinking about thinking. Because over here Quran says then man was provided with Ruh, that is the divine energy from Allah, which gives us the ability to make choices and intent, and which provides us consciousness. This is what the Quran terms as Summan Shanahu Khalkan Akhara. Then human beings became a new creation. Tabarakallahu, and it has the ability to develop itself and stand on its own feet and be counted. Ahsanul Khaliqeen, and Allah Himself is the most beautiful and most balanced creator, and man also becomes a creator with this ability. And he should create good, not create evil in the world. A new creation possessing the ability to create a new life within it. Then Allah declares Himself to be Allah la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum. Here note the attribute of life and being firmly established. Now, this is where I would like to connect to that, where we said that human beings, we should make Allah as our model based on all those divine attributes. And there are two attributes here, hayyul qayyum, that is, He gives life, He Himself is alive. And then He's qayyum, He is firmly established. And it's the same root as Sirat al-Mustaqim. He's alive and gives life. Then He states about the Quran, لَيُنْذِرَ مَنْ كَانَ حَيًّا, that Quran provides warning, provides admonishment, a reminder for those who wish to be alive, to provide a warning to those who are alive or wish to be alive. The point to reflect on here is that if we possess divine energy, and then if this self accepts exactly that Iman for which the Quran stipulates the procedure and process, then our concept of him provides us with that eminence which acquires the ability to understand Deen and its finer issues. It's a very difficult point and challenging for me as well to explain it, despite the fact that I think I have come to grips of the essence of it. That what Quran is trying to tell us is that you have an intrinsic value, and this intrinsic value at a fundamental level has tremendous ability to get multiplied and keep rising in terms of its own eminence and its own loftiness. And if you make Allah as a model, who is Hayyul Qayyum, then essentially you are holding on to that handhold which is not going to break. And despite not being visible, it will take you to that destination which his Rububiyyat demands that you should be able to acquire that, achieve that higher status before you leave this life. Because after going from this world to the next world, we have become something different. We have developed ourselves. Our effort is to rise to that highest level where we are able to establish the system of Deen, so that even when the system of Deen is not established, we rise to that higher eminence and loftiness which can be achieved. And this is something to which Quran is trying to draw our attention. The Quran cautions us not to live a life in which you are neither alive nor dead. And this is the life, la yamutu fiha wa la yahya, which most human beings are living because they are not aware of the purpose of their life. We only become, when we become aware of the purpose of life, we possess higher consciousness. And we can see that higher consciousness has a higher value. It makes us, we acquire a higher self-esteem, we acquire higher eminence, and we understand our own importance in the grand scheme of things. They will then neither die nor live. We can witness the state of nations in the world. Next verses, the Quran deals with the issues of human psyche. Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum maw'izatum min rabbikum wa shifaa'un lima fis sudur wa hudan wa rahmatul lil mu'minin. A verse which really needs a lot more representations to expand it, because this virtually deals with the problems which human psyche faces in this world, and particularly that human psyche which has not come to the Quran, and what Quran can offer that human psyche to solve its problems and to make it realize that it has a far higher purpose of life than the purpose at which this one is living. This is that law of mankind which has come towards you from the direction of your Rabb in the form of this code of guidance. In this there is treatment for every discord of yours which keeps your heart in a state of anxiety. I think I'll read it again. In this there is treatment for every discord of yours which keeps your heart in a state of anxiety, which guides every one of those nations that accepts it as their code of life towards the path of successes and benefits them with the means of nourishment. And we know nations consist of individuals. So if individuals understand it, then the sum total of those individuals who form nation, the nation will also understand it. Expanding the verse by parts. Let us look at the verse in parts. First, it addresses whole of mankind. Second, it informs them of the arrival of a code of life in which lies the secret of their eminence and loftiness. Moizatun word in itself includes that benefit. Third, it is from Rabb, not Allah, i.e. it covers guidance for all aspects of Rububiyyat as a system. Fourth, it helps to deal with all those aspects of human psyche which are required to live this earthly life successfully. For example, total freedom from fear and huzn of every kind. And we can't get rid of fear and huzn unless first we come to terms with this understanding that what creates fear and huzn. And that is where the solution lies. Fifth, if it is followed, then it will help to become Momineen through its guidance and rahmat, and all those potentials which are latent within the human self will manifest in the inner and outer world. Another way to look at this verse is that it is addressed to each one of us individually and also collectively. For example, it is telling I, that is myself, each one of us, with choice and intent, who possesses choice and intent, that try to understand it intellectually, that you have a certain cognitive makeup which includes your emotions and desires. And Quran has used one powerful term for that, as-sadur, which is normally translated as heart, but that is how we should look at it. This constitution at a fundamental level creates dissonances which are required to be identified and dealt with effectively using the guidance of the Quran. And then this newly acquired self, free from these inner conflicts, grows further. And that comes under Rahmatun. And we know the root of Rahm is where nourishment and development is part of this root. This dissonance-free self will help to come to terms with the understanding of the system of deen. Now, the point over here, which is for our very profound reflection, is that if we have a dissonance-ridden self, then that self will not be coming to terms with what is given in the Quran. And some of the verses will not make sense to us. So the Quran is asking us as Momineen, as those who are seeking haqq and who want to proceed towards the system of deen, that they must make their self dissonance free. We'll come to this slightly later. Various aspects of human psyche referred to in the Quran. The Quran itself has referred to some of these dissonances as cognitive issues in relation to the hypocrites. For example, fi qulubihim maradun fazadahumullahu maradan walahum azabun alimun bima kanu yaksibun. This is a verse right at the beginning in Surah Al-Baqarah regarding hypocrites. There is disease in their hearts which keeps multiplying, and their inner discomfiture is linked to telling lies. This see kanu yaksibun, that because of their thought process and their conduct, they are causing a disease, and that disease keeps multiplying because they do not treat it, because they do not become aware of it, or they deliberately do it thinking they are getting some kind of benefits. Why do people lie? Is it due to the nature of man-devised systems in which all those lies are counted as successes when people are not caught out but benefit materially? Now, this comment is for all of us, those who are on this path, that what is the cause behind it? Because Quran says, warn others. Are we giving warning to these people? Is the system warning them or encouraging them? And we can see this is going on, for example, in Pakistan, where people are being blackmailed by making their videos. And this is going on across the developed world as well, because all this technique has come from the developed part of the world. What about the use of diplomatic language, starting wars based on lies? I just put down some of these points just to draw our attention and for those who are going to watch this presentation later on. At the time of the initial creation of Adam, the declaration of Malaika in verse, for example, 230 was, Kalu atajalu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima. They said, will you place therein one who will create fasad and sheds blood? If we hold these kinds of proclivities in our subconscious, which need to be addressed, and do not address them, then will these not cause problems in our inner world? And that's a very important point for us to consider and reflect on. Because when Quran said that at a basic fundamental level, man will create problems for himself, he will create parties, he will divide himself. And irony is, for example, we think that parties are blessings, because that is the basic constituent of democratic system. Even if these are not brought into our consciousness, human beings do have these inclinations, and by merely burdening the self with them, but not identifying them and resolving them, is bound to create issues at some point in our life and prevent the development of the self. Because our cognitive makeup should be taken as a whole, not in parts. And if whole of this has certain contamination in its background or within it at subconscious or unconscious level, then it will be naive to think that it will not create problems for us while we are going through this journey of life. And if this cognitive makeup is the one which is going to help us to create new life or to create a self which we can develop, and with this kind of contamination within it and not being addressed, then we can see that there is a problem with this self. And that is the point I'm trying to make over here. Keeping track of the changes in our psyche is part of our developmental process. When the Quran states that in Allah la yugayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yugayyiru ma bi anfusihim, we have gone through this verse in detail in chapter 13. The state of a people can never change until they change their psyche. I'll say again, the state of a people can never change until they change their psyche. It draws our attention to looking critically at our inner thinking process and deciding on the kind of world we want. As noted in 1044, Allah does not do injustice to anyone. It is people who do injustice to their own selves. This means that we need to look at the whole purpose of our existence as human beings. Whatever problems exist around us and across the world, we need to gain knowledge about them and examine them from both the non-Quranic and the Quranic viewpoint, and then compare the two. If we come to this conclusion that the Quran has a solution for these issues of life, then we need to convey this to others so that mankind benefits. And this is important because if I don't understand, then I can't pass it on to others, period. And this is something which Allama Parwez, I was going through one of his lectures, which he gave to local Bazm in Lahore, and he very beautifully stated over there that the purpose of Tolu Islam is to understand the Quran and then pass it on to others, period. To understand the Quran ourselves, that each one of us should understand the Quran every week, and then during the week pass it on to others. And that is where the success of this lies, that our job is to pass it on to others, shares others, because it gives us conviction in what we have understood, and secondly, it expands our own horizon. It is not an easy task, as opinions about prevalent sectarian versions of Islam are quite entrenched, and it's not easy. And who says it is easy? Quran also says it's not easy, and people are not willing to pay any attention to what is contained purely in the Quran itself. However, this is the present day situation, and we need to keep passing on the message. So we should make an attempt, even pick up the phone and talk to someone saying, it's interesting, we had a lecture this week, and I can send you those slides, and there are some very important points covered over here. I benefited. So we can always start a conversation and then take it to the end and talk to them, so that as a result, our own vision expands. And that is important, because as our vision expands, the other verses which are going to come next are going to make more sense. Explore the horizons of human consciousness. When the Quran states, give from your possessions and wealth, it is pointing to the influence of this on our psyche. The self is not material and is not supposed to allow residence of material things within its abode. Why? And this is something which I thought through, because the next verse actually is dealing with that, and I will expand it over there, that our metacognitive ability is abstract because thoughts are coming out of thoughts. And are we supposed to occupy them with the priority of material things? Of course, material things are important to live this physical life, and without that, we can't have a system of being. But we have to be able to discern between the two, differentiate between the two. It is meant for another self, for example, the good of other selves. Looking for the meaning of life through material things will make it impossible to acquire a new life and a new self. Loss of material possessions will mean loss of a sense of identity, and we can experience this here in this life. Because Quran does not want us to slow down at any point in time in this world. Once we have come to the Quran, it wants us to remain dynamic, keep pursuing, keep moving forward. Every week should be a step forward in our life. For example, despite having surplus wealth far beyond their needs, some people take their unexpected losses to heart and end up dying early. And of course, the fear of losing wealth will also occupy our mind if we are more concentrated towards this aspect. That is the fear of becoming poor. And I've seen people all their life, they kept accumulating, thinking that they may not go poor. And they did not think that there are human beings who are living with far less. And what about them? How do they pass their life from day-to-day basis? The issue to which the Quran points our attention to is the higher purpose of our creation and the fact that we have certain latent potentials which can only manifest under the guidance of the Quran. By virtue of their presence, even in latent form, we simply cannot become free from this dissonance effect until we get on to Surah al-Mustaqim. Those who comprehend this aspect, Allah asks them to take the lead and help others understand. And this will help to create a new Jamaat of Momineen who will become eligible for the help of Allah. Few verses pointing to the fundamental issue faced by man on the planet, first stage of cognitive evolution. And this is another point we should keep it in mind, that we are at the first stage of the evolution of ourself. Because here we have become aware of ourselves, and we are of course fully aware of physical self. And then this self, which has emerged out of the normal worldly self, should I say, under the non-Quranic system, and it has become Quranic, and now we are taking it forward. And it will then meet its next stage of going through the emergent evolution. Over here, I've quoted a verse from Surah Al-Hadid, and I'll go through the meanings. Their sights are only on the immediate benefits of life, whereas compared with the higher concept presented by the Quran, the status of physical benefits is merely that of sport and entertainment, through which some temporary pleasure can be sought or some beautifications or pageantry can be executed, or to have pride in this, that I have more possessions than others, or to compete in a race to exceed others in progeny and wealth. And the Quran is saying, don't make this the aim of your life. These are the means to get through this life. And the next one is from Surah Al-Munafiqun, and I'll go through the meanings again. Nevertheless, this is the state of these hypocrites, and these are their designs. Therefore, O Jamaat Momineen, see to it that you do not fall prey to their words, as a result of which your state may become that like them. The love of possession and progeny turns you away from obedience to the laws of Allah. Remember that severe harm will reach those people who will do this. And this is important because this is the reason that we have not been able to establish the system of deen, because we do not have enough people who possess that kind of a self to whom Allah's help can arrive, who can get the help of Allah, and who become a Jamaat Momineen by removing their differences, and then are in that state where they understand or fully grasp the system of deen. Because if the minds are contaminated with these things, which are part of the system of the capitalist system, man-made system, and we should keep that in mind, because that is where the Quran is asking us to focus. Dissonance in relation to the capitalist system. And these are 4 verses over here which need our attention, and I will just go through the meanings. The first is, the purpose of his life is to keep accumulating wealth and then to keep counting it. Allazi jama malan wa addada. And we see that particularly people who get onto this path, and big businessmen like Bill Gates, they get that flair of accumulation and greed, and countries become like that as well. Who can tell you other than Allah what is this Jahannam of destruction? And Quran says this is that fire kindled by the law of requital of Allah, the flames of which encase the hearts. And this thing leads to not only their own lives are destroyed, because end of the day, each corporation is headed by one person, each country is headed by one person. And these things, we should keep it in mind, that why are they doing it? Because they are not aware, they don't want to follow that path which the Quran is asking them to follow, because they think that the life will end with their death. Dissonance originating from being divided internally and externally. We have gone through this verse previously as well, and I'll go through the meanings. Remember, deen is not the name for an individual maslak. Maslak means a pattern, a way of life, some kind of a system, nor the way of parties. Hence, it is essential for you that all of you, without exception, remain firmly adherent to this system and do not allow sectarianism and parties to enter into Ummah, because sectarianism is shirk. Just recall your previous life when instead of being united, you were divided into sects and groups, and that is the life to which the Quran is drawing our attention, that is the life before coming to the Quran. You are avowed enemies of each other. In that state, Allah bestowed such a system of life through which not just an outwardly unity, your hearts became united and you became brethren among yourselves. That means Quran is asking us to keep reminding ourselves that where we were and where we are, and we should do it on a weekly basis. Every week when we come for this meeting, come together, we should see that have we made a progress from our last Sunday or not. You're becoming tied together in this way in the relationship of Iman to become one brotherhood. What a supreme reward of Allah this was. Before this, you had reached the brink of the hell of annihilation and ruin when this system of Allah saved you from falling into it. Because each passing day, each passing week, or each passing month means that we are getting closer to our demise from this planet, and we have less and less time available to us. And reminding ourselves on this basis, on this path, of course, it will create some stress and anxiety. But that stress and anxiety should be taken as positive, because unless we have some kind of a concern, we cannot fulfill our commitments. We cannot carry out solid deeds. We cannot carry out study and analysis, and we cannot think about these things. And in order to draw our attention to the Quran, we have to make an effort. We can't gain anything in life without making an effort. Even in our worldly affairs, in a man-made system, see how much effort we make on a daily basis. Allah explains His laws and codes and their outcomes and successes perspicuously in this way so that the correct path of life remains in front of you. Few examples of diseases of the heart. I added this slide on the advice of Brother Asif Jaleel. But this aspect will be expanded later on once we have another presentation on this. Do not say those things which you do not do or are not going to do or will not follow through. And this is addressed to Momineen. Do not say things which cause pain and distress to others. For example, see the case of Hazrat Musa. In case of Hazrat Musa, if we go through this verse, he said that he addressed his people and said that I am a messenger of Allah. Why do you cause pain to me? Of course, they were disobeying his commands or raising objections to what he was telling them. And now, of course, we don't have messengers of Allah, but we have to look at the Quran and see that do we have resistance against the Quran? Do we like or dislike certain things, and how do we compare the two? And when we are conducting among other people, I hope we are not causing pain and distress to others. So that means we should be highly aware of what we say and the way we think. Do not ridicule others. This includes sarcasm, also inner thoughts. Do not put down others, including inner thoughts. That means it is not only that outwardly we put down others, but we should not have those thoughts within our own heart as well. And becoming aware of our own inner self is something which means that we have acquired a higher self. This needs a very high degree of consciousness, needs education and reminding each other. And we should train our children on these lines as well. Do not call each other names, whether in their presence or behind their backs. Because calling names, whether in their presence or behind them, or just copying them, or somehow insulting them, in any case is bad. And we should not waste our energies on these things. If thoughts come to us, we should get rid of them. Avoid any kind of suspicion. This arises in our thoughts, and we need to be aware of it, recognize it, and then either investigate it or cancel it. Do not spy on each other, and particularly this is about among Momineen, because we need information. We work in a world which is man-made, and we know that how much troubles we have around us. Information collection should be in relation to any investigation, not for satisfying our malicious intention. Backbiting must be curtailed. It provides some kind of self-justification and superiority complex. However, sharing information to guide or warn others does not fall under this. And over here, we have to be very careful that whatever we say and whatever we think, it should not be for the sake of getting some kind of pleasure under inverted commas. But in case, for example, we can warn someone from the evil of somebody, then we, by all means, we should. And among Momineen, if we see any error, mistake, or some fault, then we should suitably inform each other. Telling lies, twisting words, not keeping promises, jealousy, envy, prejudices, harassments, having reservations and not clarifying, hiding evidence, not promoting good and forbidding evil, all of these are part of our inner conflicts, our own issues, which Quran helps to remove. This aspect will be covered in part 2 under this verse 1057. Finding out these aspects of the human psyche is part of a study of the Quran. So not only that we should know these and remove within our own selves, but we have to tell others as well. And this will form an essential part of education and training in a system of deen. Now let us come to the last verse for today's presentation. The Quran brings balance to human existence. قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ بِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Say to them that receiving this kind of code of guidance is because of the fadl and rahmat of Allah. You could not have obtained it at any price, and so you should celebrate it on its receipt. This is better than every one of those things which you keep accumulating, i.e., more valuable and cherished than every possession of life. Actually, this translation celebrate over here of al-yafrahu is really inadequate. If we get a chance, we should look at the root of this word as well. It is more in context of the system of deen and its establishment. Reflecting by parts, there are 4 parts of this verse which individually and collectively require attention. Firstly, say to them that after fully comprehending the matter coming before this verse, that is the verse 1057, of which it is an intrinsic part, the human psyche which wishes to undertake these duties on behalf of Allah, should study intently the next part of this instruction of Allah. Secondly, this Quran, its guidance is due to the fadl and rahmat of Allah. And fadl is some bounties which we get free. In fact, everything we get free from Allah, including our intellect. And we have to appreciate it. We have to make use of it. If I have certain potentials and if I don't make use of them, then I'm not meeting the criterion of fadl of Allah because I'm wasting it. And rahmat means, of course, then to grow it, those potentials, take them forward. And normally fadl is translated as bounties. All those benefits, bounties, and eminences associated with this book will come to us as achievements due to our strivings on this path. And while we are going through this process, we'll come to appreciate these aspects. And we are already appreciating it in our efforts to bring out the best out of the Quran at this point in time. We are already benefiting from it. Already the field of our consciousness has expanded, and we are now understanding those things which were somehow not before us previously. Thirdly, the consequence of this process of following this path is that it leads to contentment and peace in hearts and minds. This is based on following the straight and established path of life together and has a clear, defined aim before us. The term fal yafrahu, which is opposite of huzn, I've just picked the one meaning, and it appealed to me because when Quran says that you should celebrate it or be happy, that means we have come to terms with fear and huzn. We have understood it. And now we are happy that we have found the solution and we are going to deal with it. Here, the term fal yafrahu here makes it clear that this is the outcome of all those thoughts and efforts which have gone into this selected path of life and whose signs have already been verified empirically. And empirically means that we have tested them, we have understood them, tested them, and seen the results. And that is important for us, that do not leave any things untested, because that is how Iman becomes strengthened. Further reflections. Now we come to the last part of the verse where it declares the supreme reality of the human self at a fundamental level of its creation. Huwa khayrun mimma yajma'un. Despite being beneficiaries of man-devised systems, never forget the importance of the existence of the self and its need for development. That is, what Quran is saying, that whatever material you are collecting, whatever those benefits you are collecting in this world, what we are giving you is far, far superior than that. While this is important, because if we don't have a body, if we don't have a physical living, then we can't develop ourself, because self is intrinsically linked to our body. But over here, Quran is drawing our attention that differentiate between the two aims of life and bring them together by saying that this vehicle of life, physical life, is important, but this is not the aim of my life. Be wary of what you do with wealth and possessions. Pursuit of all these will distract you from the real purpose of human creation. Allah provides a reminder through His book. The reminder is to make the aim of the Quran the purpose of your life through choice and to come to terms with it willingly. And that is important. The change has to come from within us. If we have accepted it intellectually and if our heart is not into it, then we are lacking something. Our heart has to accept it as well. It is just like this. If our child is sick and if we know what is the disease and who can treat it and we don't do anything, then our heart is not into it. Our heart will come into it when we pick him up and take him to A&E, we take him to the doctor and get him treated. And same is the situation over here. Merely knowing things is not enough. Our heart and soul must get into the Quran and try to see that how can we draw benefits out of it for ourselves. Keep in mind that Iman of the Quran is linked to the system of Deen. If we look at this verse in inverse order, and I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, let me see it in inverse order and see it's a different world. It is just a different perspective. Then it means that if the aim of life becomes only accumulation of material benefits, then there is no possibility of becoming Falyafrahu. Then we will never understand the fear and huzn. Then no bifadlillahi rahmatihi, we will not appreciate the fadl of Allah and its nourishment and its further development process. Then live a life full of discords, i.e. no access to shifa lima fi sudur. Then of course the Quran is not for us. We will not get treated because we are creating problems for ourselves right at the fundamental level. And this means the task assigned by Rabbikum, that is the Rububiyyat. There is absolutely no chance of us understanding Rububiyyat, and then working for that is a remote possibility. Your Rabb can never be accomplished. We can see how the Quran guides us through the process of reading through the meanings of these verses and then applying these rationally by focusing on the system of Deen. The question may arise in our minds, why should we delve so deeply into it? And I'll leave it for our second presentation. Now over here I've drawn a schematic because I found that there is a gap between the understanding of verse 57 and 58 and it needs to be highlighted. Gap between the two verses for our reflection. At the fundamental level, 1057 says that this book has come to you and it is of course for Rububiyyat, and it has come to provide you the treatment, the recipe for all the diseases of your mind and heart. And it is a guidance and rahmat for Momineen and addressed to mankind, and then it takes us to Momineen, that Momineen will emerge out of it. And then is out of mankind, those who are looking for guidance accept the challenge of the Quran and start to strive on this path of Deen. Note the plural tense here. And this verse we can look at in Surah Al Imran, where Quran says that you have emerged out of mankind. You have come out of mankind. Just like crops, you have grown out of mankind. Those who unite for one cause, they remove their dissonances of all kinds, reach an eminent level where the system of Deen starts to take shape. Here they near the stage of Allah's hamd, where they anticipate success coming their way. And then is this verse, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا وَخَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. And direction of education and self-development. See, from this verse to this verse, we have to go through a number of steps before we reach here. In fact, whole of Quran falls in between these two verses. And this is not the state of only these two verses. We have seen it in other verses as well. We need far more details and to understand. And in fact, the whole system of Deen is within the Quran, and we should try to find links between the verses. And with that, we come to the end. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. And please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.